All right, welcome everybody to the SIG Instrumentation meeting. Today is June 13th, 2019. Remember that this meeting is being recorded, so everything you say will stay on the internet for eternity. Okay, and with that, let's jump into our agenda. Our first item is the email thread that we had about basically finishing the metrics overhaul. I think, Han, I think you specifically wanted to talk about this one, right?
I did want to talk about this one. I know that it was slated for 115. I know that there was some pushback from the other SIGs towards the end of it. I mean, the record of that is in the comment section of the PR. And then I went back and I reviewed the CAP, and it looks like all the CAP approvers were SIG instrumentation people, which is weird since this basically ends up modifying other SIGs binaries. And so, you know, like currently I'm working on this migration CAP, and so it's a similar situation. And it seems like we don't actually have a protocol for doing stuff like this. I don't know if it makes sense to go through SIG Arch for these sorts of approvals, or if it makes sense to go through each SIG individually. I mean, like our CAP system isn't really designed to handle mass approvals from each component owner, right? Like it's kind of a pain in the ass because if you want to get something implementable, then technically you would want all of the approvers to LGTM your CAP. And if you have like a zillion component owners, it can, I mean, basically you might as well just give up or whatever, right? Like, so I don't know what other people think about this sort of thing, or if you guys have any thoughts.
So I feel like this can only really be solved by being super loud about this, right? Like making sure that the communication has been done appropriately. I guess what we did previously wasn't enough. So we did announce it on the mailing list. We did announce it in the Kubernetes community meeting. I guess we should have at least posted it on most SIGs involved mailing lists. Potentially even directly tell the SIG leads. Maybe at least for the SIGs that own the binaries, as you said. I think that could make sense. Yeah, I think while I would want, while I understand how SIG Arch could make sense, I don't know if that actually solves the like communication problem, right? Even if SIG Arch, even if we do talk to SIG Arch and SIG Arch says this is fine, go ahead, it still doesn't solve the problem of users being informed about it, right? Because that's ultimately why we didn't go ahead, or that's the concern, right? So yeah, I feel like I mean, now it's slipped, so obviously it's not happening in 115. I guess that's probably for the better anyways. But now we should go ahead and be really consistent and loud about our communication with this landing in whatever we decide. I feel like it should be in 116, but I guess that's still up for discussion.
So, I mean, by 116, we will have, well, theoretically, we'll have the framework in place. We can literally just add the deprecation warnings, and people in the binaries will get those warnings in their logs. They will know.
So but you're intending to so you're saying the metrics that currently just have the deprecation warning in the.
Yeah, we can actually just deprecate them, and then and then they will know. I mean, like, whoever's working on it, the developers will know.
But you're proposing to only remove them in 117 then?
Yes. Or even, it might even be 118 because it would be one default on, one default off, or something like that, right?
That would mean that would mean that we're actually waiting the four releases.
Deprecation, yeah, the on-off deprecation.
For something that has 0 stability guarantees, right? That seems a little.
Yeah, but 0 stability guarantees is like, you know, we can say that all we want, but people are still treating them as APIs.
Yeah, I think it feels to me like deleting them at the same time as introducing the deprecation warnings and going, oh, we're introducing deprecation warnings for some, but we've also just deleted a pile at the same time. Sort of feels like it's going to annoy some people. I like, it doesn't feel good to me having to keep them till 118, but I think it's realistically, if we're wanting to stick to the guarantees that we're putting in place, I think it's the only way.
It's not that bad, right? Like, I mean, they're just there. We can delete them whenever.
Yeah, I totally agree with all of that, but at the same time, we're also saying that all the metrics that we have right now are going to be an alpha and can be removed at any point in time without notice, right? So are we actually going against that? That would mean that the ones that are currently deprecated are treated as, in the new world, as stable metrics.
Only because they've been implicitly stable. People have been implicitly treating them as stable. Now we are moving to an explicit model. And now we are explicitly saying these things that you might have been treating as stable are not actually stable. We're giving you some leeway, but then we're going to remove them. As opposed to just removing them and people freaking out over it.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I still feel like like we're kind of mixing. I understand that we are kind of intentionally mixing two caps, but at the same time, like the one cap was already
it
underway.
Preceded the other one. It preceded the other one. Yes, I know. No, I'm just, I want to be fair to people too, right? I don't want random component owners to hate us. That would suck.
What do you feel about reaching out to the SIGs that own the binaries and just ask what they think? Like we did deprecate them in 114 for sure. Everybody can see this. We did communicate it, but we obviously didn't communicate it well enough. Let's see what they say if we were to remove them in 116. If these people, if those SIG leads say that that's still too aggressive, then we can come back and rediscuss, I would say.
Or what we could do, maybe a middle ground, is we can deprecate them as hidden. So they will not show up by default in 117, but you will be able to enable them with a flag.
I think that would be okay.
Because then they will know that this thing is gone, and then they have one cycle basically to fix it, and then we're removing it. So basically, we're telling them we're committed to removing it in a quarter.
I think that would be okay. That gives people one.
Yeah, it's like a compromise, but yeah, it's
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it gives them urgency to act.
Yeah, I think I would be okay with that.
Okay, so moving forward though, so for changes that involve other SIGs, do we want to get requisite approvals from all those SIGs on a cap? I mean, what is Arch guidance on stuff like this? because should they be able to block instrumentation things? I mean, like, I guess technically they should be, but
maybe for like framework kind of things, it's probably better to go through, like, to just verify with SIG-Arch, because at the end of the day, they're responsible for like overseeing like cross SIG efforts in some way. So I think for stuff like that, it could make sense to just involve SIG architecture, and like there are architecture decisions that they make that in fact affect every SIG, right? So that's not necessarily new to them.
okay.
I think probably the metrics overhaul, that probably was an oversight, and we should have confirmed with every SIG that owns a binary. But in order to, like, our mission is to put like guidelines and stuff like that into place, right? And if we're enforcing those guidelines, then we're also just following what we should be doing. So I feel like, yeah, I feel like that's just following our duty at that point.
Yeah, for sure. I'm also, like, I'm not even thinking about the overhaul. I'm also thinking about migration. So for migration, we're also going to touch all of these components. These component owners will have to approve these PRs. You know, does that mean that they have to be approvers on the CAP? Or does that mean we should at least have, we should probably have at least listed them as reviewers, right? If not approvers.
I think having them as reviewers, having them as reviewers is probably sufficient.
Same thing with, maybe that should be the guideline moving forward with like overhaul type, migration type things where you should have reviewers and people should be looking at it so that they know.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, okay, then I'll, yeah, maybe we should just do that. Okay, so second thing, there's metrics migration.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I talked about this with you offline, but the one tricky thing about metrics migration is the fact that there are shared metrics, which means that if you were to migrate a component or a metrics endpoint piecemeal, then a shared metric potentially poses a problem, mostly because then you have unmigrated components which are using that shared metric. And so that shared metric will be in a binary state. It's either migrated or not migrated. So you kind of need a way to support both. So I had a couple ideas for it. They are listed in my draft cap. But the one I'm inclined towards at the moment is basically wrapping the current shared metrics as a legacy shared metric, and then exposing a migrated version of that shared metric in like a different folder, different package path, that a migrated version can use the migrated version of the shared metric, while unmigrated component can use the legacy one. And then we can just delete the legacy one afterwards. It's easy for cleanup once the thing is over. Otherwise, you have to have some complicated logic in the shared metric, which will toggle between using the migrated or the non-migrated metric, and it can get kind of messy.
Yeah, I think that's fine. given what's like pictured in this draft. Like if it's really only those 5 packages that represent shared metrics, then I think
they're the only ones.
Then I think duplication for migration purposes is probably the right thing to do.
Yeah. Okay. That was it. So if you guys want to take a look at the draft cap, it will be a work in progress. Hopefully we'll be up for real review in like a week or so, and then maybe we can see if people have any objections to it and sign it off and get an implementable state by the next SIG meeting. And then I think Peter Soldoff wants to present his structured logging thing.
Yeah, it's in the same state as this one, so we'll try to get it into implementable state in a couple of weeks. Somebody already commented on the PR, and it's all work in progress.
Do you want to discuss the current status of it?
I don't think I have much because we do have, you left a couple of comments over there that we'll address. But I don't think it doesn't seem like there's anything fundamentally wrong with this proposal, so we just need to fill in more details and then discuss it before next meeting.
Okay, that works for me as well. Okay, in that case, it looks like we're already through our agenda.
There was one more thing though, right? No, it's not on the list, but there was the comment that you made on the thing, which is not related to the cap, but we should probably discuss it.
Yeah, okay, go ahead. Or I mean, I can mention it. So you're talking about the comment that I wrote like half an hour ago, right? Yeah. So basically, I commented on the newest cap, which is metrics validation and verification, although it's kind of blurry which cap it really belongs to. How do we marking a metric as stable is a really strong guarantee that we're giving, because we're essentially saying nothing about this will ever change. Like label keys won't change, label values won't change, metric name won't change, which is a great thing for users, but a terrible one if we've done a mistake. So I'm kind of thinking if there should be like an intermediate state. And the example that I gave was the API server request total and duration metrics that we have found to not suffice multiple times, and we have intentionally changed them multiple times because things like scalability tests weren't accurate enough or stuff like that. So even for our own very use, we needed to change them. So
I do have some thoughts about this. So, okay, the thing about the problem with introducing beta at this point is beta basically has the same guarantees as you. You can't make backwards compatible changes. The deprecation cycle is shorter, but we're still in the same spot.
That's only the case if we're defining beta for metrics the same as beta for APIs, right?
Yes, but the thing is, one of the things about Kubernetes APIs is that people use beta as a stable API.
Maybe it should have an entirely different name. I'm just saying maybe there should be a state where we're saying we are considering this metric, but we need to have it on trial for longer to understand if this is actually the state that we can keep it in.
Why can't you keep it in an alpha state?
We could do that, yeah.
And then like after like a quarter or 2 quarters or whatever of the thing not changing and people demonstrably showing that this is not going to change, then you can go for metrics API review and promote it to stable. And another thing is like if you want to add a dimension to a metric, I mean, philosophically, the way people have to look at it is different, right? Like if you want to add, this new dimension to request count total or whatever, then maybe it just makes sense for you to make a new metric and then join that metric with the stable one, because that's also possible.
Yes, I think it's possible, but I think that could cause very, very strange UX.
Like, what do you mean?
So let's say we do have the API server request total in a stable state, and we realize there is this new label value that we would want. I don't know, there's a new API being introduced, which would cause a new label value, right? How do we deal with that? There's definitely going to be another API.
A label value or new label?
I'm talking about the label value right now.
Well, label values is fine. That's not backwards incompatible.
That depends on your query, right?
Yes. So, I mean, one thing we should do in metrics API review is we should make sure that the labels are bounded. The set of values are bounded, because we have definitely not been doing that, and that has been a cause of memory leaks repeatedly for us.
Absolutely.
But besides that, as long as it's an enumeration, theoretically, it's backwards compatible.
Is that the same for histogram buckets?
Yes, they are label values.
Okay,
I mean,
I would have thought so as well. I just wanted to hear your opinion.
Yeah. I consider them backwards compatible. The only thing that it changes is the memory footprint of metrics, right? So if you increase the number of labels, the metric endpoint now has a bigger memory footprint, and we should be cognizant of this. But in general, I'm not inclined to think that label values, adding a label value is a backwards incompatible change. The schema, right? Like if you think of the labels as being a field on a database model, the schema of your database table is the same. Right?
Yeah, I agree with that. Okay, I guess we're mostly like, I'm a little bit afraid, I guess, of just introducing these rules, and then we end up in a case where we realize one of these rules weren't a good decision. Like, how do we...
I'm sure that will happen, and then we'll have to revisit, some of these assumptions that we made, and I think that's just a part of the process.
Yeah, maybe we just need to do the mistake and see. Yeah,
it might make sense to enumerate those scenarios and basically give people an example of this is how you add a metric, and this is how it evolves, and explain how those steps work, so that give them a little bit of a sort of more understanding that this is not a scary change, and then we've thought about all these various transitions.
Yeah, I think we need to formally define an API metric review, and then have some documentation for people how to go through it.
Yeah. And maybe even something as silly as like a cookbook. Here, you've added the metric, you wanted to, add a new value. What's next? And like how it works in the new world of metric stability and levels of support.
Yeah, that seems reasonable. Now, yeah, okay. But adding a new label,
it's backwards and forwards. You're basically changing the database schema. That's the problem.
Also depends on your queries, right? I think almost in the same way as label values. Like the amount of queries that would break are probably equivalent in number as if you introduce a new label value. Like groupings, percentages of values across time series, stuff like that.
Well, I mean, if you're grouping by a label value, if you have a new label, your grouping is still valid.
Right. And it would still be valid in the same way if you add a new label.
Right, but depending on your backend, it breaks ingestion.
Right. Now we're getting to it, which is technically we have Prometheus support, right?
Yeah.
How can we even do anything if we don't know, like, I don't know how Stackdriver works. I don't know how AWS CloudWatch works. Like, how do we deal with consumers?
Well, I think they have to get involved, and they have to be here, and they have to say, this is how our thing works, and we should do something to prevent this from breaking. I think that's important. I think, you know, this is a reasonable group, and if people voice concerns about their ingestion pipelines, I'm sure everyone here will be receptive to listening and to finding a solution for them.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we can't do more than that, I think, but yeah. Okay. Anyways, I feel like we're actually pretty much on the same page. So I think what Peter said was a good point. Let's maybe draw through, like, actually think through some of these scenarios and write them down in maybe documentation or in one of the caps, just so that we think this process through a little bit more. I think that would be helpful.
Sounds good.
Okay. And I believe we're already at the end of our time. So unless there's anything anybody wants to talk about last minute, going once, going twice. Okay, in that case, everybody have a wonderful local time. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.